Marcus had always found peace in the rhythmic ticking of clocks. His workshop, tucked away on Elm Street between a bakery and a used bookstore, was filled with the gentle symphony of dozens of timepieces marking each passing second. At 53, he had spent the better part of 30 years surrounded by gears, springs, and pendulums, finding comfort in their predictable precision. That Thursday morning started like any other. Marcus arrived at his shop precisely at 6:30, just as he had for 3 decades. The familiar weight of his brass keys felt reassuring as he unlocked the heavy wooden door. The morning light filtered through dusty windows, casting long shadows across workbenches, cluttered with tools, watch faces, and delicate mechanisms in various stages of repair. He flipped the lights and began his morning ritual, checking each clock to ensure they were keeping proper time, adjusting those that had drifted overnight, and winding the mechanical pieces that required daily attention. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed 7 times, its deep voice joining the chorus of smaller timepieces throughout the room. Marcus was reaching for his favorite screwdriver when he heard something that made him freeze. Humming. Someone was humming a melody he didn't recognize, soft and lilting, coming from the back room where he stored his most delicate restoration projects. His heart began to race. He was certain he had locked the shop securely the night before, just as he always did. The back room had no windows, no other entrance. Yet the humming continued, growing slightly louder as if the person was moving closer. Grabbing a heavy wrench from his workbench, Marcus crept toward the back room. The humming stopped abruptly as his foot hit a creaky floorboard. He paused, listening intently, but heard only the eternal ticking of his clocks. Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the door. There, sitting cross-legged on his workbench, between a 19th-century mantel clock and a collection of pocket watches, was a woman he had never seen before. She appeared to be in her 30s, with striking silver hair that seemed to shimmer despite the dim lighting. Her clothes were unusual, a flowing dress that looked like it was made from starlight, shifting between deep blue and silver as she moved. Most unsettling were her eyes. They were the color of storm clouds, gray with flecks of electric blue, and when she looked at him, Marcus felt as though she could see straight through to his soul. "Hello, Marcus," she said, her voice carrying a strange echo, as if it were coming from far away. "I apologize for the intrusion, but I'm afraid I had no choice in the matter." Marcus dropped the wrench, which clattered loudly on the wooden floor. "Who are you? How did you get in here? How do you know my name?" The woman smiled, a gentle expression that somehow made Marcus feel both comforted and deeply unsettled. "My name is Vera," she said, sliding gracefully off the workbench. Her feet didn't make a sound when they touched the floor. As for how I got here, well, that's rather complicated. I came through what you might call a crack between worlds. The barriers that separate dimensions are particularly thin in places where time is carefully measured and maintained. Marcus stared at her, his logical mind rejecting everything she was saying while his eyes confirmed that she was definitely, impossibly there. "That's insane," he whispered. "People don't just appear out of thin air, don't they?" Vera asked, tilting her head. She gestured to the clocks surrounding them. "You spend your days working with time, Marcus. You understand better than most that reality isn't always as fixed as it appears. Every tick of these clocks marks a moment where anything might be possible." As if responding to her words, every clock in the workshop suddenly stopped ticking. The silence was profound and disturbing, like the world itself was holding its breath. Then, just as suddenly, they all resumed their rhythm, perfectly synchronized. Marcus felt his knees go weak. This wasn't a dream or a hallucination. Whatever was happening to him was absolutely terrifyingly real. Rosa Martinez had lived next door to Marcus for 15 years, and in all that time she had never seen the clockmaker act so strangely. At 71, Rosa prided herself on being observant. Her small apartment above the bakery gave her a perfect view of Marcus's workshop. She had grown accustomed to his predictable routines. But for the past 3 days, something had been different. Strange lights flickered in his workshop at odd hours, not the warm yellow glow of his usual work. Lamps, but shifting blues and silvers that seemed to dance across the windows. The sounds were wrong too. Instead of the familiar ticking of clocks, she heard what sounded like whispered conversations and soft, otherworldly music. Rosa had tried knocking on his door twice, but Marcus had answered looking disheveled and nervous, claiming he was working on a particularly complex restoration project. His eyes darted back toward the workshop constantly, and he kept the door barely cracked open, as if hiding something. On Friday morning, Rosa decided she had worried enough. Today she baked a fresh batch of her famous cinnamon rolls, Marcus's favorite, and marched across the narrow alley between their buildings. As she approached his workshop, she could hear voices clearly now. One was definitely Marcus, but the other was unfamiliar, a woman's voice with a strange musical quality. "Marcus, you must understand," the woman was saying. "The rifts are becoming more unstable. If I don't repair them soon, other things might slip through, things far less pleasant than myself." Rosa pressed closer to the window, trying to peer through the dusty glass. What she saw made her gasp. Marcus stood near his workbench, gesturing animatedly at a woman Rosa had never seen before. But this wasn't what shocked her most. The woman appeared to be floating several inches above the floor, her silver hair moving as if suspended in water. Round them, every clock in the shop was running at different speeds, some racing frantically while others crawled in slow motion. The plate of cinnamon rolls slipped from Rosa's hands, clattering loudly on the cobblestone alley. Both Marcus and the strange woman turned toward the window. "Ah!" The woman's storm-gray eyes met Rosa's through the glass, and for a moment, Rosa felt as though she was falling through space itself. Marcus rushed to the window, his face pale with panic. "Rosa, I can explain." But Rosa was already backing away, her heart pounding. She had always believed in keeping an open mind about the mysteries of the world, but this was beyond anything she could comprehend. Protective instincts toward Marcus Ward, with her fear of the impossible scene she had witnessed. "Who is she, Marcus?" Rosa called out, her voice trembling. "What's happening to you?" Marcus looked back at the floating woman, then at Rosa. "Her name is Vera," he said quietly, "and I think she might need our help." Rosa saw the fear and confusion in her old friend's eyes. Despite her terror, she knew she couldn't abandon Marcus when he needed her most. Taking a deep breath, she stepped closer to the door. "Then I suppose you'd better let me in and tell me everything." Dr. Benjamin Thorne had been fascinated by temporal mechanics since his graduate studies at MIT, but he never expected to encounter evidence of actual dimensional instability in a quaint clock repair shop. As a quantum physicist specializing in theoretical applications of parallel universe theory, he spent most of his time buried in equations and computer models. His weekly visits to Marcus's workshop were his one concession to the analog world. Place where time was mechanical and predictable, but something had changed in the electromagnetic field around Elm Street. His sensitive equipment at the university lab had been detecting unusual fluctuations for 4 days now, emanating from somewhere in the historic district. When he arrived at Marcus's shop Friday afternoon for his usual appointment to pick up his restored pocket watch, he brought a small handheld detector with him. The readings were off the charts. Marcus answered the door looking harried, his usually neat appearance disheveled. Behind him, Dr. Thorne caught a glimpse of an elderly woman he recognized as the baker from next door. But there was someone else in the workshop, a woman with an otherworldly presence that made the air itself seem to shimmer. "Dr. Thorne," Marcus said, blocking the doorway. "Perhaps this isn't the best time. Your watch isn't quite ready yet." Benjamin held up his detector, its lights blinking frantically. "Marcus, I'm not here about the watch. These readings suggest there's a massive distortion in space-time centered on your shop. The quantum field fluctuations are unlike anything I've ever measured outside of a laboratory." He paused, studying Marcus's troubled expression. "What's really going on here?" The mysterious woman appeared behind Marcus, seeming to glide rather than walk. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that shouldn't have been possible from human vocal cords. "Dr. Thorne, isn't it? Your reputation precedes you? I believe your expertise might be exactly what we need." Benjamin stared at her, his scientific mind racing. Her very presence seemed to bend light subtly around her edges, and his detector was now emitting a high-pitched whine. "You're not from here, are you?" he whispered, Not from this dimension. Vera smiled, an expression that seemed both ancient and timeless. Very perceptive, Doctor. I am what you might call a dimensional traveler. The barriers between parallel realities have been damaged, and I've become temporarily stranded in your reality while attempting repairs. Benjamin felt his worldview expanding and contracting simultaneously. Everything he had theorized about quantum mechanics and parallel dimensions was standing before him in living form. The quantum fluctuations, he breathed. They're caused by dimensional bleeds. The mathematical implications alone, are terrifying, Vera finished. If the rifts aren't sealed properly, the unstable boundaries could cascade across multiple realities. Your Earth could become a nexus point for interdimensional chaos. Rosa stepped forward, her face pale but determined. In plain English, please, what exactly are we dealing with? Dr. Thorne turned to her, his excitement barely contained, despite the gravity of the situation. Imagine reality as a soap bubble. Rosa, Vieira's dimension, and ours are separate bubbles floating next to each other. But something has caused small holes to form between them. If those holes get bigger, both bubbles could burst, Rosa finished, understanding dawning in her eyes. Precisely, Vera said. And I cannot repair the damage alone. The process requires anchors in this reality, people who can help stabilize the quantum field while I work. She looked at each of them in turn. I need your help, all of you. Luna Rodriguez had always seen things other people missed. At 8 years old, she had learned not to mention the dancing shadows in her grandmother, Rosa's kitchen, or the way flowers sometimes whispered secrets when no one else was listening. Adults got worried when she talked about such things, so she kept her observations to herself. But when Abuela Rosa brought her to the strange man's clock shop on Saturday morning, Luna immediately knew this place was different. Magic hung in. The air like the scent of rain before a storm, and the pretty lady with star-colored hair was the most beautiful thing Luna had ever seen. Hello, little one, Vera said, crouching down to Luna's eye level. Unlike the adults, who seemed to struggle to look directly at Vera, Luna found herself drawn to the woman's storm cloud eyes. You can see me clearly, can't you? Luna nodded solemnly. You're from the place where dreams go when we wake up. She said with the matter-of-fact tone children use for obvious truths, but you're stuck because the doors are broken. Vera's expression shifted to one of wonder. How did you know that? The same way I know you're scared, Luna said, reaching out to touch Vera's shimmering dress. The fabric felt like cool moonlight. Against her fingers. Something bad is trying to follow you here, isn't it? The adults exchanged alarmed glances. Marcus knelt beside Luna, his voice gentle but urgent. What do you mean, Luna? What's trying to follow her? Luna looked around the room, seeing things the grown-ups couldn't. Dark tendrils of something hungry and cold pressed against the edges of reality, searching for ways through the cracks Vera had accidentally created. Shadow things, she said simply. They eat light and make everything cold. They want to come to our world because they've eaten all the warmth in theirs. Doctor! Thorne checked his equipment frantically. My readings are spiking again. Something is definitely probing the dimensional barriers. Vera stood, her calm demeanor cracking slightly. The child is right. My passage through the dimensional walls has attracted the attention of entities from a reality where entropy has won. They're parasitic by nature, drawn to dimensions where order and energy still exist. Can you stop them? Rosa asked, unconsciously. Moving closer to her granddaughter, not alone, Vera admitted. But Luna's perceptive abilities could be the key. Children often see past the illusions that limit adult perception. If she can help me locate all the rifts, Luna tugged on Vera's dress. I can see them, she said quietly. There are 7 tiers in the air around the neighborhood, 3 big ones and 4 little ones. The shadow things are pushing through the biggest one behind the bookstore. As if summoned by her words, the temperature in the workshop suddenly dropped 10 degrees. The clocks began ticking erratically, their rhythms becoming discordant and anxious. Through the windows, the afternoon sunlight seemed to dim, as though something was slowly swallowing the light. They're here, Vera whispered, her form beginning to glow with protective energy. Everyone stay close together. Luna, I need you to be very brave now. Can you show me exactly where you see the tears?" Luna looked up at the strange, wonderful woman who had turned her world upside down, then at the three adults who were trying so hard to understand something beyond their normal experience. She thought about the shadow things pressing against their reality, hungry and patient and cold. "I'm not scared," Luna said, taking Vera's glowing hand in her small one. "Let's fix the holes before the bad things get through." The confrontation came at sunset, when the boundaries between day and night made the dimensional rifts most vulnerable. The group had spent the afternoon mapping the 7 tiers Luna could see, while Dr. Thorne worked frantically to understand the quantum mechanics involved. Rosa had closed her bakery early and enlisted her neighbors to stay indoors, telling them there was a gas leak investigation underway. Marcus found himself at the center of something far beyond his quiet, ordered existence. His workshop had become command headquarters for an interdimensional crisis, filled with improvised equipment that combined Dr. Thorne's scientific instruments with Vera's otherworldly technology devices that looked like jewelry but hummed with barely contained energy. The shadow entities had been testing the barriers all day, sending tendrils of absolute cold through the smallest rifts. Wherever they touched, color drained from the world, leaving patches of gray emptiness that hurt to look at. Luna was the only one who could see them clearly, directing the adults away from contaminated areas while Vera worked to reinforce the dimensional walls. "The largest rift is destabilizing, faster than I anticipated," Vera announced, her usually composed voice tight with worry. "If it opens completely, the cascade effect could tear holes in reality across your entire continent." Dr. Thorne looked up from his equipment, his face grim. "The quantum field is reaching critical resonance. We have maybe 20 minutes before the system becomes irreversibly unstable." "What do you need us to do?" Marcus asked, surprising himself with his calm determination. 3 days ago, his biggest concern had been a stubborn mainspring. He was helping to save reality itself. Vera moved to the center of the workshop, her form beginning to radiate intense light. "I need you to form a circle around me, Marcus. Your connection to temporal mechanics will help anchor the repair process. Rosa, your protective instincts create a stabilizing, emotional field, Dr. Thorne. Your understanding of the science involved will help guide the quantum adjustments. And Luna, ... She smiled at the little girl. "You'll be my eyes, telling me what you see as I work." The temperature dropped dramatically as the shadow entities launched their final assault on the dimensional barriers. Street outside began to fade to gray as reality itself started unraveling at the edges. The workshop's clocks went haywire, some spinning wildly, while others ground to a halt. "Now," Vera shouted over the rising dimensional storm. They joined. Hans, Marcus, and Rosa, Dr. Thorne and Luna, with Vera at the center of their protective circle. The moment their connection formed, Marcus felt a surge of energy, unlike anything he had ever experienced. He could sense the flow of time itself, see the threads that connected past, present, and future. Rosa's fierce love for her granddaughter became a warm light, pushing back the creeping cold. Dr. Thorne's analytical mind provided structure to the chaotic energies swirling around them. But it was Luna who made the real difference. "I can see the tears healing," she called out, her young voice cutting through the dimensional noise. "The pretty lights are pushing the shadows back." Vera's power flowed through their linked hands. Guided by Luna's clear sight and anchored by their combined will, one by one, the rifts began to seal, the fabric of reality knitting itself back together. The shadow entities retreated with sounds like winter wind through dead leaves, their hungry presence fading as their access to this dimension was cut off. When it was over, they found themselves sitting on the workshop floor, exhausted but triumphant.
Ow.
The clocks had resumed their normal synchronized ticking, and warm afternoon light streamed through the windows once again. Vera stood slowly, her form already beginning to fade slightly at the edges. "The barriers are stable now," she said, her voice carrying notes of both relief and sadness. "We can return to my own dimension. Will we see you again?" Luna asked, the only one willing to voice what they were all thinking. Vera knelt and kissed the little girl's forehead. "Perhaps someday. But for now you have each other, And you've learned something important, that the impossible is simply another word for the unexpected.
No.
Months later, Marcus still found wonder in the daily routine of his workshop. Rosa often brought Luna to visit, and the little girl would point out small magical details the adults missed, the way dust motes sometimes danced in patterns that spelled out words, or how certain clocks occasionally kept time for other dimensions. Dr. Thorne had published a groundbreaking paper on quantum field fluctuations that made him famous in academic circles, though he never mentioned the true source of his insights. He still visited the workshop weekly, and sometimes Marcus caught him staring thoughtfully at the spot where Vera had first appeared. Their quiet neighborhood looked exactly the same as before, but everything had changed. They had learned that reality was far more flexible than they had imagined, and that magic lived in the spaces between what was known and what was possible. Most importantly, they had learned that facing the impossible was much easier when you didn't have to do it alone. The clocks in Marcus's workshop continued their eternal song of measured time, but now their rhythm carried subtle harmonies that seemed to whisper of other worlds, other possibilities, and the endless adventure of existence itself.